to the DolphinsTalk.com podcast, the most listened to daily Miami Dolphins podcast on the internet.
Miami's got the Dolphins, the greatest of all.
Come on, Dolphins fans. Time to fins up.
We're in the air, we're on the ground, we're always in control. And when you say Miami, you're talking Super Bowl. Cause we're the Miami Dolphins, Miami Dolphins, Miami Dolphins number one. Miami Dolphins, Miami Dolphins, Miami Dolphins number one.
Hello, Miami Dolphins fans. How are you today? And thank you for listening to the DolphinsTalk.com podcast on this Thursday, June the 26th. I'm your host, Mike Oliva, joined by a very special guest. You all know him. You all love him, Mike Florio from NBC Sports and ProFootballTalk.com. Mike, how you doing talking to the Miami Dolphins Nation today?
Do they all love me or do they love to hate me? Or do
I love you. I love you, Mike. So that's all that matters. But, I had John last year and we had some laughs. What fan base have you upset most recently? And does every fan base think you hate their team at this point?
Ravens fans were upset with me this week. Anytime I say anything about Lamar Jackson, they assume I'm trying to attack him in some way. And we, as part of the reporting on the collusion case that was decided in January and hidden by the league and the union for 5.5 months, part of the details in the document that Pablo Torre was able to finally unearth, and we broke it down in detail on his podcast, Pablo Torre Finds Out. There are nuts and bolts of the negotiations that resulted in Lamar Jackson's 5-year contract with the Ravens, and some of it's interesting, like when he was trying to negotiate directly because he doesn't have an agent with Ravens GM Eric DeCosta, he claimed at one point, Lamar did, that the microphone on his phone was broken. I mean, it was just an unprecedented look behind the curtain at the way the sausage gets made. But because we mention Lamar Jackson and talk about Lamar Jackson, the Ravens fans get pissed off because anything we say about Lamar Jackson means we hate Lamar Jackson, even though we've argued for years he deserves a massive contract. We've argued for years there should have been more teams trying to get him when he was available. I voted him MVP for 2023 in the AP voting, and he was the PFT MVP that year. I voted him the MVP in 2024 in the AP voting, and he was the PFT MVP. But we hate Lamar Jackson, according to the average Ravens fan.
Well, we see that here with our quarterback. You can't even mention his name without each extreme. You have one extreme, loves him no matter what he does. One extreme, he can't do no right. They just come out in force, and it's like everyone. And that's just the way the media world is with some players, although it's now becoming more with almost every player. You mention your name, you either hate them, you love them. It's like there's no middle ground. You can't even try to have an honest conversation, which makes it tough. And I'm sure in your spot where you cover
as
every
Charles
team.
Barkley says, as long as the check shows up on the 15th and the 30th of the month, I don't care.
Exactly. All right, let's start with Jalen Ramsey. They're going to get rid of him eventually, Miami. I don't know, probably by the start of training camp. So you probably have another month, I would think, most likely. Are the Rams the only team that's even showed any remote interest at all? And is that the problem where Miami just has no market for him? I know he makes so much money and they just gave him all that last year. It's tough to trade that contract. But are there any other teams at all interested?
You mentioned that contract, and my friend Big Cat from Pardon My Take says dysfunctional teams do dysfunctional things. Well, sometimes you see dysfunctional things, and it causes you to conclude that maybe the team is dysfunctional. And it's the height of dysfunction to make Jalen Ramsey the highest paid player in the league at his position in September, and by April decide we've reached the point of no return and we must move on, even though we've already paid him $4 million for 2025 and owe him more than $20 million on top of it, fully guaranteed. And the Rams are the only team that have publicly acknowledged the possibility of what for them would be a reunion with Jalen Ramsey. I saw last week that I think it was Shefty pushing the idea of Chargers and Rams being interested. Until there are two teams at the table, the Dolphins are screwed because the Dolphins have no leverage in a one-team negotiation. In a one-team negotiation, the Dolphins have squandered the ability to say, we'll just keep him. And I use this example all the time. If you have a car that you're trying to sell, and you're not sure you want to sell it, and you have a price that you want for it, and somebody lowballs you on what you've asked for it, if you just say, that's fine, I'll keep it, then fine. But if you're desperate to get rid of it, you're going to take whatever your best offer is. And if you've only got one team making you an offer and you're determined to move on from this guy, what's your option? Your option is to just hold on to him, pay him every week. It almost becomes a potential Deshaun Watson situation from 2021, where he stays home with the team's blessing, and he has to be on board with it as well, because you can't tell a guy to stay home with pay. Yeah. But he stays home voluntarily, gets paid, and waits for a trade to come along, maybe that would be sparked by necessity as a result of an injury or something along those lines. But if it's just the Rams, it's going to be very hard for the Dolphins to get the best possible deal. They need 2 or more teams at the table.
Yeah, and I think last week he was working out with some guys who play for the Pittsburgh Steelers, and he followed a bunch on social media. I don't know if that means
Steelers
anything.
aren't going to pay him. I'm sure he'd love to go to the Steelers. The Steelers aren't going to pay him.
Yeah. Jonnu Smith, he was rumored to go to Pittsburgh. That sort of died down. He's someone else. Had a great year last year. Then he wants more money. I kind of get it from Miami's side. We just can't give guys more money every time they ask for it. But that's a big loss if and when they do move him. Have you heard anything more on Jonnu?
How many teams can you think of, Mike, that have this many unresolved issues?
Oh, we are one of one. We are unicorns. We are unicorns.
These are all things, folks, that a normally functioning organization get handled in March. If you're moving on from Jalen Ramsey, you move on from him in March. If you're moving on from Jonnu Smith, you move on from him in March. And then there's this weird Tyreek Hill vibe that I think is just a ticking time bomb. The moment that he decides it reminds me a lot of Devontae Adams last year. I firmly believe the Raiders went to Devontae Adams and said, give us one more try. And if you get to a point where you think it's not working, we'll trade you. I'm not saying that same kind of conversations happened with Tyreek Hill, but it just feels like it's a tentative truce that is subject to change suddenly and dramatically if the Dolphins start off 2-5. So you don't, like, normal teams don't have this. And it's troubling to me. And to me, it's a harbinger of what could be doom for the Dolphins in 2025.
Yeah, and with Hill on August 31st, they're going to write him a check for $15.85 million as part of his new money he got last year. And that leads to the question, if they do start off 1-6, 2-4, 2-5, late October, early part of November, when we get to that magical time when they can trade, are you going to trade a guy, 6-8 weeks after you just wrote a check for $15.85 million? Because here's the deal. At the end of this year, I don't care how many games they win. He gone after this year. They would love to get rid of him now, probably, but they can't. But would they write him a check on August 31st for $15.85 million? And if they're having a year that's not going well, trade him, 8 weeks later? I think they'd have to, but that's a tough pill to swallow if I'm Mr. Ross.
Well, they've been swallowing tough pills lately. They swallowed the Xavier Howard pill. They're going to swallow the Jalen Ramsey pill. And the whole Tyreek Hill thing. Look, again, why'd you give him the new contract last year? Why'd you do it?
You didn't have to.
You didn't have to do it. You didn't have to do it. And when the guy says to the world immediately after the Week 18 game that it's in my best interest to leave, I don't care what the excuse is later. He does the Super Bowl week Lord, I Apologize tour to try to put the toothpaste back in the tube. You can't take that back, and you can make whatever excuses you want for him. Under moments of intense stress, the truth comes out. And the truth came out. He wants out. And, this will placate the half of your fan base that is anti-Tua. And I've never really confirmed this, but I've heard that one of the issues for Tyreek and one of the issues for Jalen, they don't necessarily believe that their guy is the guy to take them where they'd like to go.
Yeah, he's going into year 6 as our quarterback. And with him, it's less about even what he does on the field. It's more about just him being on the field. Is he going to play that week because of all the injuries? Do you think he's reached his ceiling as an NFL quarterback, or is there room to grow? And what are your thoughts on Zach Wilson now being the number 2 in Miami?
Well, there's room to grow from the standpoint of there's room to win when the conditions aren't favorable to what Tua Tagovailoa does best. And I don't want to take away from his abilities. He runs that globetrotter offense like no one else can. And I was encouraged by the signing of Zach Wilson because I think Wilson has the skill set to learn it. You know, think of how much pressure it puts on the rest of your offense. If you have one quarterback who can do all that stuff that happens, it makes it's beautiful to watch when Tua's playing. And then in comes the backup, and they never do it because the other guys can't do it. I think Wilson can do it. Wilson has to practice it, but it makes the offense have some consistency and continuity if the backup quarterback can do what the starter does. So I've long believed that Zach Wilson's failures are a result of where he got drafted. He was the consensus number 2 overall pick. It wasn't a reach by the Jets. It was Trevor Lawrence, Zach Wilson, 1 and 2 in 2021. And the Jets have ruined other quarterbacks early in their career. Geno Smith, Sam Darnold. This may be another one. And Zach Wilson very well may get an opportunity if and when Tua gets injured again. You know, it's funny, though, when we expect him to not make it through a season, he plays all 17 games. And when he played all 17 games in 2023, we're like, okay, he's past this now. And then boom, right out of the gates, he has another concussion. It's that is the most troubling aspect of this because your quarterback, to be a true franchise guy, he has to be able to play all the time. And when you develop that scarlet letter of injury, you can't be a franchise quarterback. You can't be a part-time player and be regarded as one of the best players in the NFL.
100%. And a lot of these, you know, I hate to say it, and fans get mad at me. He brings on himself, holds on to the ball too long. He won't slide, run out of bounds. The play's over, give up on the play. He won't. He came back last year versus the Rams Monday night. He throws a pick, fine, no big deal. He's head first trying to tackle the guy. Like he has to realize he can't do that stuff. And until he does, and I know he says all the right things all the time, which is great, but the actions have to back up what you actually say, and he has to learn, give up on a play. It's one play. Throw the ball.
I remember watching him go after a Bears defensive player, and I think it was his first season in the preseason after a turnover. He's going in, throwing in his head to try to make a tackle. And, you know, there's a fine line, as they say, between courage and stupidity. And I think that there is in Tua, and I'm not judging, I'm observing, there is an excessive amount of pride in his willingness to throw himself into the breach, that he has no regard for his own health, safety, and well-being. And there's an admirable quality that this guy is willing to sacrifice his body for the greater good or the lesser good or for anything. Bad play, I'm going to go do something about it. But it's stupid because you're hurting your team and you're hurting yourself by getting yourself injured. I'm a firm believer. Anytime there's a turnover, the quarterback needs to get his ass on the ground. Don't go try to make the tackle. Don't create some Teddy Bridgewater Keystone Cops video where you go alligator arm the guy. Just get your ass on the ground, right? Lay there like what was it in A Christmas Story? Randy, when he falls down, like, just lay there. Just lay there. Like he did when Scott Farkas and Grover Dill. Just lay there. It was his only defense, right? He lay there like a slug. It was his only defense. That's what quarterbacks need to do. You don't need to be a hero. You don't need to prove to us that you're brave. We know you're brave. Anybody who crosses the thick white line onto the field is brave. But by going too far to show us how brave you are, you do things that hurt your team. And that's what Tua does. Not that, I can't remember whether any of the concussions happened as a result of him going to make a tackle or doing something he shouldn't have done. But just when he does it, it's like the guy hasn't learned how to protect himself. And until he does, it's going to continue to be a narrative.
Yeah, absolutely. Mike McDaniel. Now, people are all over the map on Mike McDaniel. He's going into year 4 as a head coach. Recently, we had on Louis Riddick yesterday on this show. He still believes in Mike. He goes, I'm all in on Mike. Mike's great. Last week, I spoke to Ross Tucker. He's like, I believe in Mike as an offensive coordinator. I'm not going to go as far as to say he's a head coach. You're the tiebreaker now. Where are you on Mike McDaniel? Are you all in on him as a head coach, or is it not everyone's a head coach? Not everyone's a head coach.
And I've said that before. Wade Phillips, Norv Turner, guys who were so excellent as coordinators, they kept getting opportunities to fail as head coaches. And for some guys, there's no shame in being a very good coordinator. I mean,
Vic Fangio.
You could be gainfully employed. You can make a ton of money. You can win Super Bowl rings. The problem is this. The narrative now, we're changing the culture. We're changing the culture. Well, who set the culture? Who created the culture? Who's responsible for the lackadaisical vibe? And that's McDaniel. Look, McDaniel, excuse me. I'm always sensitive to make sure we get the last names right. Yeah. McDaniel. But with McDaniel, I love who he is. I love how he is. He's an iconoclast to a certain extent. I mean, you don't expect to see this guy who's chill and skinny and, just everything about him. I love it. But does it work in a locker room of grown-ass men if you're not going to get up someone's ass if they're 5 minutes late? If you're going to tolerate some of the things that have a dotted line to whether or not you're going to have the discipline necessary to win, that's the problem. And they keep saying, we're going to change the culture. We're going to change the culture. At some point, you're going to change the coach. And what happened, I think it's as simple as this. Brian Flores was too far this way on the hard-ass spectrum.
Yes.
And teams tend to hire the exact opposite of the guy they just fired. So they went all the way to the other end. Breath of fresh air, completely different from Brian Flores. Well, the best answer may be somewhere in the middle. And my concern is, and this is what dysfunctional teams do, they just keep going back and forth on this pendulum. So post McDaniel, they'll go hire a hard ass. And then after they've had enough of the hard ass, they'll go back to the nice guy. But it seems like one of the problems. And when Jordan Brooks, when the call comes from inside the house after the loss to Green Bay at Lambeau Field on Thanksgiving night, that the defense was soft. I mean, that's the worst word you can put on a football team at any level. We were soft. Where does that come from? Where does that come from? It ultimately comes from the coach.
Yep.
So can he? And I'll give you the example. At some point, we've had a teacher who all of a sudden decided halfway through the school year that he or she was going to be different.
That ain't going to work. That ain't going to work
me anymore.
Yeah.
And we just sit back and laugh. Yeah, sure. And for McDaniel to try to change, that cuts against his whole authentic vibe. So I think they're in a mess here. I really do. I think this is going to be a crucial year for him. It's a crucial year for Tua, because I think if there's a new head coach, new head coach's first order of business is, I'm getting rid of Tua. They owe him fully guaranteed contract for 2026. I think if there's a new coach after this season, cost of doing business, we'll pay this guy to move on, like the Broncos did with Russell Wilson, like other teams have done. We don't care. We need to rip this Band-Aid off and move on with a new quarterback. That's the pressure on Tua, Mike McDaniel, and everyone going into this season, I believe. And look, I'm not the one making the decisions. Maybe Stephen Ross is fine with it. But as he's ticking closer and closer to his expiration date, and I think of Leon Hess back in the 90s, he got desperate near the end of his life because he's like, hey, I want to win a Super Bowl. I'm going to make these moves. I can't imagine Stephen Ross not wanting to make a big move after this year if this year is another disappointment for the Miami Dolphins.
That was going to be my next question on Ross, because his history, though, is he sticks with the guys too long. He did it with Jeff Ireland and some others. He just, he gives guys a long leash. And to me, this comes down to Chris Grier at the end of the day. Chris Grier has been with the Dolphins for 20 years. He's been the general manager since 2016. This guy survives everything. So even if they move on from Mike McDaniel, will Chris Grier, even if it's not his GM, if they move him up to a VP, senior advisor, if he's still in the building, I don't know what changes, because Grier just seems to survive everything. At what point does Ross become fed up with Grier, who's had his fingers in everything? He hired Flores. He hired McDaniel. He's brought in all these players. At what point is he held responsible? And when does Ross get fed up with him? Because he's the top of the food chain, which everything else comes down from McDaniel to Tua. That's the question to me. Not that you have the answer, but when is Chris Grier ever held accountable?
He drafted Tua, and then they doubled down with the contract that guaranteed 3 full years. They didn't need to give him a contract that guaranteed 3 full years. They could have done a contract that guaranteed 2 full years. So they gave him more than they should have given him based upon what he had accomplished, and also based on the market. I mean, we were making the argument last year, let him play out his contract and let him go see who else is going to pay him. Who's going to pay him? what he's looking for. $50 million plus per year. No other team is going to pay him that. I firmly believe it. And it's not a slight against Tua. It's just an acknowledgement of reality. I said the same thing with Brock Purdy. Why are you giving Brock Purdy all this money? If he's a free agent, is somebody going to give him that much money? Now, at the end of the day, the deal the 49ers did with Purdy, much better for the team than the deal the Dolphins did with Tua. But that all goes back to Greer. And, Mike, I think the fundamental problem is this. Stephen Ross is an absentee landlord, and he always has been. And if you're not in the building every day, you never have the confidence level that you need when it's time to make big decisions because you're not there to observe. You don't get the vibe that is developed by interacting with people on a regular basis. And the sweet spot is you want to be around, you want to be available, you want to show the key employees that you care, but you don't want to meddle. You want to let them do their jobs, but you still want to be there and you want to be able to understand how this works because I think it equips you to make confident decisions. And so when we're not confident in our options, we tend to do the most conservative thing, which is stay the course, because we don't have the confidence necessary that making a change is the right change. And also we don't have the confidence that our next GM or our next head coach is going to be better. So let's tolerate a situation that might not be ideal, because if I try to change it, I might end up making it worse.
Yeah. And, I know he's had some offers recently to sell the team. I know that big hedge fund guy, Ken Griffin, who's got like one of the richest people on the planet, he made him an offer, said no. Last year he sold 3% to Joseph Tsai, who owns the Nets and Liberty. So I know he said he's going to pass the team off to his youngest daughter, I think. We'll see, because with the prices, what the Lakers just sold for, I can only imagine what an NFL team would go for. At some point, he might just sell.
$10 billion is now the minimum.
Exactly.
For an NFL team.
And plus, he owns a stadium. He owns like everything around the stadium, so he could get a ton. We'll see what happens there, because I do think he might be coming up to a point where he might want to sell. Last question, I'll let you go. Heading into the season, who's the second best team in the AFC East?
Second best team in the AFC East right now is the Patriots.
I would agree.
Yeah. Mike Vrabel is going to make them better. The team is better. They've rectified some of the roster mistakes that Bill Belichick made late in his time there. I'm just a big believer in Vrabel as a coach. And I think the Titans, again, dysfunctional teams do dysfunctional things. They didn't make it work with Vrabel, and they should have. And I think the Patriots are going to benefit from the fact that he's there. And I think they can make it to the playoffs this year. Hell, when the schedule finally came out, there was this weird glitch where their over-under for wins was like 7.5 or 8.5, but they were favored to win 11 of their games.
Yeah, that's weird. The other glitch for a schedule, if you have time, look at the schedule for the Bills. They get every tough opponent at home, like Ravens, Eagles, Chiefs, and I think they have one tough game between week 1 and week 9. I mean, they're going to win 14 games. They're going to clinch the East by Halloween. They play nobody the first 8 weeks, and every tough opponent comes to their building.
And then Bills have the Chiefs in the playoffs again.
Yeah, well, that's true too. Mike, thank you so much for your time. I appreciate everyone. Check out Mike Florio at NBC Sports Pro Football Talk. Always appreciate it. Thank you again.
Thank you, Mike. Take care, buddy.
Later. Hey, everyone. Mike here from DolphinsTalk.com. Real quick, I just want to give a thank you for watching this video. Please be sure to smash that like button and subscribe to our channel. Also, just want to say thank you for all the support you provide us here at DolphinsTalk.com and have over the many years. We thank you. Thank you. Thank you. It's much appreciated. Without you, there would be no us. I know there are so many other podcast options out there these days, whether it's true crime, the NBA, Major League Baseball, news, politics, and of course, other Miami Dolphins podcasts as well. We really do appreciate you taking a few minutes out of your day, each and every day, to watch our stuff here at DolphinsTalk.com. Also, if you like this show and want more content from us, please be sure to sign up for Dolphins Talk Extra. Go to patreon.com/DolphinsTalk. We have a private message board where you can interact with only extra members and ourselves here, the staff at the website. We have extra podcasts about the Dolphins and also extra podcasts not about the Miami Dolphins. And we give away a ton of prizes. We have a ton of contests that are exclusive to Dolphins Talk Extra members. We give away autographs, memorabilia, jerseys, hats, all that fun stuff. So everyone, please be sure to go to patreon.com/DolphinsTalk. It's $3 a month. It's really cheap. You'll have a lot of fun. Trust me. But once again, thank you so much. Everyone have a great day.